How are you thinking about climate change at this point in Europe?
Right. I mean, the fact that the U.S. steps out of the Paris Accord is obviously not good news. We've seen in the last 10 years and even above expectation rise in temperatures, and it seems like the absorption capacity of the Earth is really diminishing. Obviously, 1.5 degrees is far away now. We're much more on a trajectory of 2% or 2 degrees, and that has big impact. And so what I see here in Davos, and unfortunately, rightly so, the attention is shifting from climate mitigation to how do we survive in a world where we see a 2% or 2 degrees increase, or maybe even more. And obviously, as insurance companies, we have a role to play here too.
That is a fascinating comment about climate adaptation, because we've seen a steady stream of climate events in recent months, extraordinary events which has led to the loss of life, loss of property, enormous amounts of insurance losses. What do insurance companies do from here? Because the message that we've been hearing all year on the set from every insurance company is that, look, we're mitigating risk, not underwriting these products. So what happens from here if large parts of the population are simply going to be uninsured?
Right. No, it's a genuine concern. And, on the one hand, as an individual insurance company, you shouldn't take on any risks on your balance sheet that you can handle. So, for example, in the Netherlands, 40% of the country is below sea level. So all this wonderful snow here is ultimately a significant part is going to end up in the Netherlands. And the flood risks have tremendously increased. So on the one hand, you don't want to take on this risk because your balance sheet might not be able to handle it. At the same time, it leaves a lot of consumers, customers uninsured. And so one example we've been looking at for flood risk is that we try to engage with the government, who is ultimately will declare a national emergency if a big flood happens and will then pick up the bill. But then it's partially covered by insurance, partially covered by the government, and it's going to get very confusing for our customers.
A lot of gray area.
So the idea is that, and we're working on this, that actually we take care of the claim handling, we pay out, and behind there we have a sharing scheme with the government, so that at least Dutch citizens in this example will be easily get their money, and we don't take on the risk that we cannot sustain. So these are the type of things, but it's not just floods, it's obviously fires, and it's very real. And I think we should be careful as an industry that we only end up excluding without looking for solutions, because then ultimately we leave a lot of people uninsured.
David, just remind me before I go to my next question, you don't have a big exposure in the US, do you?
No.
No. So, but what we have seen is companies in the US reassessing their commitments to financing and insuring climate initiatives because there's concern about discrimination, or also some of the politicians, certainly in the States, have had concerns that and brought cases against financial companies who haven't been backing dare I say it, more hydrocarbon type activities as well. Are you worried about that kind of activity actually crossing the Atlantic?
Well, what we see is litigation on both sides. I mean, we've seen in the Shell case in the Netherlands, now with ING, we've seen NGOs.
Came down in the end in The Hague, down to...
so the first ruling was in line with the NGO. The second ruling was more in line with Shell. But so we see on the one hand NGOs litigating that we should do more. And you potentially have cases on the other side where you say, you're doing too much, this is not your responsibility. And I think the only way we can deal with it is just follow our own policy. There's no way we can keep every stakeholder here happy. So we need to come up with our own line. And our reasoning has been that we did set a target of reducing our carbon footprint of our investments with 25% at the end of this year, and 45% at the end of 2030. And we have committed to around 13 billion of investments in green energy transition.
So let me get
and we'll continue to do that then.
David, let me get this absolutely right. Your own commitments to reducing your carbon footprint, tick, 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 I get that. But what about providing insurance to companies who have a wavering attitude? Because there's a lot of companies that are oscillating out there. They had the commitments, they had the NZ, they're all excited after Paris, all excited after Glasgow, and they are failing to stay with those commitments. Would you discriminate against them with higher premiums or indeed not insuring them if they don't stick to their targets?
Well, I mean, we are primarily a retail company and an SME, so we don't really insure large companies or large projects. So it's SME and retail. But on the investment side, there are instances where we say this company that we have been engaging with is not making any significant steps in terms of reducing their own carbon footprint, and that if that engagement is really going nowhere, that could also lead to exclusions.
Well, let me just ask you that and tie the two stories together. What's your attitude to Shell at the moment, investing in that from an from the investment side of things? great fan of Wales Swan. He's a great business leader as well. He's in the tricky position, as you say, with activists on both sides as well. But they are lessening their commitment to the speed of transition.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not going to comment on all individual things in our portfolio, but
it's
clearly we're watching Shell. They have committed to Paris 2050. That's the good news, but they have not set clear interim targets. Right, and we all know 2050 is far away, so we're monitoring, what does that mean for the plans to 2030, because most of us CEOs are not going to be around when it's 2050. So we need to see what interim steps are being made, and just saying we align with Paris 2050 is not enough.